The air was thick with the scent of decay and old medicine as I stepped through the broken doorway of the abandoned hospital in Hokkaido. My name is Akira, a photographer drawn to the forgotten corners of Japan, seeking beauty in desolation. Today, my lens was focused on the eerie silence of this place, once a sanctuary for the sick, now a shell of its former self. The motivation was simple, to capture the haunting beauty of decay, but as I ventured deeper, the atmosphere shifted from melancholic to unnerving. The initial excitement gave way to a creeping unease, my footsteps echoing too loudly in the empty halls. It was in what must have been a patient's room that I first heard it, a whisper, so faint I thought it was the wind. But there was no wind inside these walls. My camera was recording, a habit to document my explorations. Reviewing the footage later, the whisper was there, clear as day, yet the room was undeniably empty. The realization hit me like a cold wave. I was alone, but something had spoken. The psychological terror of that moment was paralyzing. My rational mind scrambled for explanations, auditory hallucinations, perhaps, or a trick of the acoustics. But the whisper was too deliberate, too human. The rest of my exploration was a blur, my senses heightened, every shadow seeming to move, every creak of the building a whisper in my ear. The climax came when I found myself back in that room, drawn by an inexplicable pull. The air was colder, the silence heavier. Then, the whisper came again, this time unmistakably a name, my name. The footage showed nothing, but the voice was undeniable. I fled, the sound of my own heartbeat deafening in my ears. Now, back in the safety of my home, the footage is the only evidence of what happened. Or is it? Watching it again, there's nothing, no whisper, no voice. Yet, I remember it so vividly. The line between reality and delusion blurs, leaving me questioning my sanity. The unsettling encounters in Japan's forgotten corners have left their mark, not on my camera, but on my mind. The whispering shadows remain, a mystery unresolved, a terror that lingers long after the experience has ended. Break time equals fives, greater than the wind howled through the skeletal trees, their bare branches scratching against the wooden exterior of the deserted mountain lodge like desperate fingers seeking entry. The backpacker, a solo traveler named Alex, had stumbled upon the lodge as dusk painted the sky in shades of deep purple and orange. The decision to stay the night was born out of necessity. The next town was miles away, and the encroaching darkness made the mountain trails treacherous. The lodge, with its peeling paint and creaking floorboards, was a relic of a bygone era, its exact age impossible to determine. Yet, it offered shelter, and that was enough. Alex's initial relief at finding refuge was tinged with unease. The air inside was thick with the scent of mildew and something else, something metallic and faintly sour. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional groan of the old structure settling. Alex tried to shake off the creeping sense of isolation, reasoning that it was just the unfamiliar surroundings playing tricks on the mind. Sleep came fitfully, chased away by the cold that seeped through the thin walls and the unsettling feeling of being watched. Then, in the dead of night, Alex awoke with a start. The sound that had pulled them from sleep was unmistakable, footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving across the floor above. The lodge was supposed to be empty. Alex's heart pounded against their ribs, a drumbeat of fear. The rational part of their brain scrambled for explanations, an animal, perhaps, or the wind. But then came the murmurs, soft and indistinct, weaving through the darkness like silk. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, a chorus of whispers that raised the hairs on the back of Alex's neck. The decision to investigate was made in a haze of adrenaline and disbelief. The flashlight's beam cut through the darkness, revealing dust motes dancing in the air like spirits. The upstairs was empty, the floorboards coated in a thick layer of dust unmarked by any footsteps. Yet, the murmurs persisted, growing louder, more insistent. They seemed to coil around Alex, whispering secrets in a language that was just beyond comprehension. Panic set in, a cold, clawing thing that rooted Alex to the spot. The rational explanations were slipping away, replaced by a primal terror. The whispers were not just sounds, they were alive, hungry. Alex fled, stumbling down the stairs and out into the night, the cold air a slap of reality. The lodge stood silent once more, its secrets undisturbed. The next morning, in the light of day, the lodge looked just as it had the night before, deserted, forgotten. But Alex knew better. The experience had left a mark, a deep, unshakable dread that whispered of things unseen, of shadows that moved when no one was looking. The backpacker left the mountain with more questions than answers, the memory of the whispering shadows a constant companion on the journey home. The lodge, and whatever dwelled within its walls, remained, waiting for the next traveler to seek shelter from the storm. Break time equals 5s, greater than the air was thick with the musty scent of damp concrete and aged metal as Alex stepped cautiously into the dimly lit tunnel beneath Tokyo's bustling streets. The flashlight in hand cast long, wavering shadows against the graffiti-strewn walls, each step echoing ominously in the oppressive silence. Alex had always been drawn to the forgotten places of the world, seeking out the stories they held in their crumbling facades and silent halls. But tonight, the usual thrill of exploration was tinged with an unease that clung like the cold, damp air to their skin. The tunnel was a relic of wartime Tokyo, a labyrinthine network rumored to be haunted by the spirits of those who had sought refuge within its depths, only to never emerge. It was this very rumor that had drawn Alex here, a challenge to their skepticism, a test of their nerves. But as they ventured deeper, the silence was shattered by a whisper, so faint it might have been imagined, yet it sent a shiver down their spine. The words were unintelligible, a language foreign to Alex's ears, yet filled with an urgency that was unmistakable. They stopped dead in their tracks, the beam of their flashlight trembling in their grasp as they scanned the tunnel ahead. Nothing. The whisper came again, closer this time, a sibilant hiss that seemed to coil around them like the tendrils of some unseen entity. Alex's breath came in short, sharp gasps, the rational part of their mind screaming that it was just the wind, the echo of distant traffic, anything but the supernatural. But the fear was paralyzing, rooting them to the spot as the whispers grew louder, more insistent, seeming to come from all directions at once. The shadows around them seemed to deepen, to move independently of the light, forming shapes at the edge of vision that vanished when looked at directly. Alex's heart pounded in their chest, a drumbeat of terror that drowned out all rational thought. They needed to leave, now. Turning on their heel, Alex broke into a run, the whispers rising to a cacophony of voices that followed them, a chorus of the unseen. The tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly before them, their flashlight flickering ominously as they sprinted towards the distant glow of the entrance. Just as they thought they might collapse from exhaustion, the mouth of the tunnel yawned before them, the cool night air a balm to their panic-stricken senses. Stumbling out into the open, Alex turned back to look at the tunnel, half expecting to see some monstrous form emerging in pursuit. But there was nothing, only the silent, gaping maw of the underground. Yet, as they stood there, catching their breath, the whispers returned, a final, chilling murmur that seemed to come from right beside their ear. Alex fled into the night, the echoes of the unseen voices haunting their every step. Days later, they would return in daylight, finding no evidence of their terror, no signs of life within the tunnel's depths. But the experience would linger, a shadow at the edge of their consciousness, a reminder that some corners of the world are best left forgotten, their secrets best left undisturbed. The whispering shadows of Tokyo's underground would call to them no more, but the memory of that paralyzing fear would never truly fade. Break time equals 5s, greater than the sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the narrow path that wound through the dense forest. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, a reminder of the village's abandonment. I had come here seeking solitude, a break from the relentless pace of city life, drawn by the allure of Japan's forgotten corners. The guidebook had mentioned the village in passing, a footnote in history, its name barely remembered. As I stepped over the threshold of what was once someone's home, the floorboards groaned under my weight, a sound so loud in the silence that it made my heart skip a beat. The village was a skeleton of its former self, roofs caved in, walls leaning precariously, nature reclaiming what was once hers. It was beautiful in a melancholic way, but as the light faded, so did my comfort. The first shadow moved at the edge of my vision, a flicker of darkness that shouldn't have been there. I turned, my breath catching in my throat, but there was nothing. Just the empty doorway of a house, its interior swallowed by darkness. I told myself it was just the play of light, my mind playing tricks on me. But then I heard it, a whisper so soft I wasn't sure if it was real or just the wind through the broken windows. It was a voice, or many voices, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, wrapping around me like a cold embrace. My skin prickled with goosebumps, and I found myself backing away, my pulse racing. That's when I saw them, the shadows, not just one but several, standing at the edges of the village square. They were humanoid but indistinct, as if made of smoke. I called out, my voice trembling, but they didn't respond. Instead, they turned towards me, and in that moment, the whispering stopped. The silence was deafening, more terrifying than the voices had been. I ran, my feet slipping on the wet leaves, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't look back, not until I reached the edge of the forest, where the first lights of the nearest town flickered in the distance. When I finally dared to glance over my shoulder, the village was gone, swallowed by the night. But the whispering followed me, a sound I couldn't shake, a reminder that some corners of the world are forgotten for a reason. Break time equals fives. Greater than the night was thick with the kind of silence that only abandoned places know. Osaka, a city alive with neon and noise, seemed a world away from this forgotten corner where the shadows clung too closely. I was here for research, documenting the eerie beauty of abandoned love hotels, their faded glamour a testament to desires long since cooled. My camera was my constant companion, capturing the decay, the stories etched into peeling wallpaper and broken mirrors. But tonight, the air felt different, charged with an inexplicable tension that set my nerves on edge. The hallway stretched before me, a tunnel of darkness punctuated by the occasional shaft of moonlight through cracked windows. My flashlight beam was a fragile thing against the oppressive dark, revealing details I wished it wouldn't, a child's toy, forgotten in the corner, its colors bleached by time. Then, laughter. Clear, bright, unmistakably a child's, ringing through the empty halls. My breath caught, my body freezing mid-step. The sound was impossible, a cruel trick of the mind or the building settling. But it came again, closer this time, sending a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. I called out, my voice echoing back at me, unanswered. The laughter had stopped as suddenly as it began, leaving behind a silence so complete it was deafening. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat urging me to leave. But curiosity, that fickle beast, kept my feet moving forward. The further I went, the heavier the air became, thick with the scent of old perfume and something else, something metallic. My flashlight flickered, threatening to abandon me to the dark. Then, a whisper, so soft I might have imagined it. "Play with me." The words were in Japanese, the voice unmistakably that of a child. My blood turned to ice. I spun around, my light slicing through the darkness to reveal nothing. The hallway was empty, the toy I'd seen earlier now resting in the middle of the path, as if placed there. That was enough. I turned and ran, the sound of my own footsteps mocking me, the laughter starting up again behind me, growing fainter as I burst out into the night. I never went back. But sometimes, in the quiet hours, I hear it again, that laughter, those whispers, calling me back to play. And I wonder, what happened in that hotel? What stories do those walls hold? The answers, I think, are best left forgotten, lost in the whispering shadows of Japan's forsaken corners. Break time equals fives. Greater than the night was unusually still as Kenji made his rounds through the abandoned amusement park, his flashlight casting long shadows that seemed to dance mockingly across the desolate paths. The park, once a vibrant hub of laughter and joy, now stood as a hollow shell of its former self, its rides rusting in silence and its attractions covered in a thick layer of neglect. Kenji had taken the job as a night security guard out of necessity, but the solitude and the eerie atmosphere of the place had begun to wear on him. He tried to shake off the feeling of being watched, attributing it to his overactive imagination and the isolation of his nightly patrols. However, as the nights passed, the feeling only grew stronger, accompanied by the faintest of whispers that seemed to call his name from the darkness. At first, he dismissed it as the wind or the creaking of old metal, but the whispers became clearer, more insistent. Then, he saw them, shadowy figures moving just beyond the reach of his flashlight, their forms indistinct but undeniably humanoid. They never came too close, always staying just at the edge of his vision, but their presence was enough to send chills down his spine. Kenji's sleep became fraught with nightmares, his days filled with dread for the coming night. He tried to rationalize the encounters, to find some logical explanation, but the park's history offered no comfort. Tales of accidents and disappearances lingered in the air like the whispers that now haunted him. One night, the shadows grew bolder, their whispers louder, more demanding. They beckoned him towards the old haunted house attraction, its entrance yawning open like a mouth ready to swallow him whole. His heart pounded in his chest as he hesitated, the rational part of his mind screaming at him to turn back, to run. But something else, something darker, urged him forward. With a deep breath, he stepped inside, the darkness enveloping him instantly. The whispers were deafening now, a cacophony of voices all calling his name, overlapping in a terrifying chorus. His flashlight flickered, then died, leaving him in complete darkness. The air grew colder, the shadows pressing in around him, their forms becoming more defined, more menacing. Kenji realized too late that he had made a mistake, that the park had never been abandoned, it had been waiting. The last thing he heard was the whispers, now a single, unified voice, welcoming him home. The next morning, Kenji was nowhere to be found. His flashlight was discovered inside the haunted house, its batteries dead, just like the park's last guard. The whispers, however, remained, waiting for the next soul to wander into their grasp, to join the shadows in their endless vigil over Japan's forgotten corners.